Hello, my name is Saye and welcome to today's segment on growing moss. Moss is one of those underappreciated ground covers that makes the difference between a regular terrarium and a truly magical one. Having surfaces covered with the layer of moss just makes everything a little bit more magical. So I try to find it year-round. Now in the spring and summer it's not bad because I have moss growing in my backyard. But when it comes to winter, where can you get moss? Well, this is a tray of moss that I've had growing for since November. And you can see a lot of it has gone to mush. But I have little tiny bits and pieces that I've been able to keep. And I've put down a layer of slate and I have this growing under a light stand, but honestly this is not enough. So I've been looking at ways of getting good moss, and one of the ways that I'm going to be exploring today is using this product called Moss Milkshake. Maybe this can be the answer to my quest for good moss year-round. Let's try it. Well, I'm going to use this tray to grow my moss, and for this I first need to put down a substrate of soil, and you can see the regular potting soil is just a little too lumpy. So to get out the larger pieces, I'll just use this sifter and just run it through. And what this does is it just leaves the really fine pieces. It catches all the big pieces of perlite and it's just that fine piece. And so I'll wet my tray so this sticks, and apply a very thin layer all around. And of course, you'll see this all throughout. Lots of spraying. Now, in case you're wondering why it's called Moss Milkshake, let's take a look inside. So this has got big pieces of moss, which are, as you can see, difficult to come out. I'll put it all out there. But it's also got some dried milk as well as some gelatin. And this is why they call it a milkshake. There are different ways to make this, but in this powdered form, it's rather easy to use, and all you have to do to activate it is add water. And it takes a lot of water. So I'll add some water, stir it, and you can see that it starts to thicken up. And as I let it set for a little while, it thickens up even more. And that's when I add more water, because it's going to make it easier for me to distribute it in a thin layer and spread it on the soil, which of course needs even more spraying. So I spread it out in a very thin layer, very gently. It doesn't look very pleasant, but hopefully the results are going to be much nicer. And continue to spread it all over until you have a nice uniform layer. And at this point, to make sure that it stays humid, I'm going to use these pieces of glass that I had out of picture frames to keep it humid, and I'll put it in my light stand. Mark the date on my favorite calendar, and we're off to the races. 2 weeks later, to my delight, I see little bits of green sprouting. Now in the instructions it says 3 to 6 months, and I am willing to wait that long. Fingers crossed. But 5 months later, it's looking pretty shaggy, and it's supposed to be that way, and then I read that it's supposed to take 12 months. It's like, oh no, I really can't wait that long. Plus I've got some really interesting creatures crawling all over it. That's not something I want to have around. So maybe this method is not for me after all. Well, everyone, that certainly was not the outcome I had hoped for when I started the segment 6 months ago. I was hesitant about whether or not to post it, and then I figured it's a learning experience and why not share that. And I'm still going to continue to look for ways to grow moss indoors because I use so much of it. But in the meantime, I've gone back to harvesting moss from the garden, and I'm going to be using it for some new projects that I'm working on. Next month I'm going to the New York State African Violet Society convention, and I have some interesting things that I'm going to enter. So be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, if you liked what you saw, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel with the button, and make sure you turn on the notifications because that's how you'll know when there's new videos that are posted. And until then, happy growing and see you next time.